We also post it on our YouTube channel.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So for everybody who's here, we it always goes on YouTube. And if you're registered and I have your email and you're not unsubscribed, you'll get a link from us.
Yeah, just send me a link. That'd be perfect.
I'll send it to you separate. I'll send it to all the artists from today. So for those of you who just joined us, if you look in the chat box, I have shared some fun links on each of our artists. And artists, if there's anything else that you want to share, feel free to share it in the chat box. So welcome.
My chat box is empty, by the way, Carissa.
Yeah, mine too.
My chat box is?
Mine is.
Says to everyone. That's interesting.
Did you click send?
Yep.
Okay.
Still
Let me copy and try again. Everyone in meeting. Did y'all get that one?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's because you weren't on yet, I bet. All right, let's try it again. I tried to do the homework before y'all got on. And it didn't work. There's another one, and then Maria. There you go. All right. Okay, well, we are here. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start. Let me get my little PowerPoint up. Got to move some windows around here so I can see my. So today we are here for the, whoops, go back. For the many women who fought for our rights, and our guests are the Pixeladies, which are represented by Kris Sazaki and Deb Cashatt. We have Maria Billings and Patricia Kennedy-Zafred. We are the Iowa Quilt Museum. We are located in Winterset, Iowa, on the historical square. And for those who haven't joined us before, Winterset, Iowa is home to the famous covered bridges of Madison County. We also have the John Wayne Museum, and we have a fantastic Madison County Historical Museum, as well as very cute, quaint shops in our downtown square. So let me introduce our artists. So Maria Billings is a fine artist specializing in unique textile paintings and mixed media fiber arts. And Maria is joining us from California. The Pixeladies, they met in college and became an artistic duo in 2003. They teach Photoshop classes and give presentations of their work. Both of them are involved in the Studio Art Quilt Associates. And I got people still entering, so 1 second, there we go. Whoops. Patricia Kennedy-Zafred has been telling stories through the medium of textiles and art quilts for nearly 30 years. And Patty joins us from, I think, Patty, it's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, correct?
Right.
Wonderful. And then the Pixeladies are also in California. So we are going to, let me just see what I've got going on here. Stop my share, and we're going to have Maria take it over.
So do you see?
Mm-hmm.
You see, okay.
There you go.
For me, it was very exciting to start working on Clara Folz, partly because I didn't even know she existed. When Sandra Seider asked me about it, I said, yes, I'll try. I'm very much in favor of women's rights. And one of the early things that I found about her after some general queries was a biography by Barbara Babcock, which I read. And I did a lot of research in newspapers because I wanted to capture the contemporary voice, Clara's voice herself, what people wrote about her. She was active. She was admitted to the bar in 1878 and then lived in California, but also, she was in New York, so I read a lot about her in the New York Times archive. She was a very glamorous woman, very outspoken during her life. By the way, she was born 1849 in Indiana, and then she grew up in Iowa, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe some local people will be interested in researching her more, because she went to school in Iowa 1860 to 63, together with boys, which was quite unusual for her time. At the age of 12, she prided herself to have read 2 books in Latin, and she was very impressed by Lucy Stone. So they talked about that she was very argumentative as a child. She had arguments with her father, who was a lawyer. And so there are just a lot of little stories about her that are kind of fun to read if anybody wants to research her further. So I read and looked at her for almost 6 months. I felt I was having a new neighbor, or maybe like a cousin. And I got into understanding her life and what it is. The way how I worked with her is I researched photos and but projector photos on the wall, and then I painted my own interpretation. Because it's the first time that I'm not using my own work. I almost always only use my own photography or my own paintings. But this time, for the sake of a historic person, I had to use historic photographs. So I wrote to a law library that had the main photos. And as you see at the bottom, they said I could use it. There was no copyright involved. And especially since I was interpreting it, not just copying it, that was perfectly fine. So spending all this time reading about her and learning her story, I kind of noticed how many firsts she accomplished. Like she was the first paid public lecturer and suffragist and so on. She also was a strong character. So in another direction on the quilt, I summarized some of her strong characteristics. She was courageous, she had charisma, but she also had flaws. Misjudgments occurred. And if somebody is interested, it's really quite fascinating to go deeper into her. Overall, after half a year of reading and thinking about it, I came up with the idea that she was really like a column for her community. So I wanted to show her as a column. And what you see in the center here is a foldable wooden board that is behind. And thank you very much, Carissa, for being able to put that up, despite the fact that you were not allowed to nail into historic walls. I really appreciate that. Of course, the quilt has as a backup a regular sleeve behind it. It could be hanging flat, but the idea was to have it really in the round. I wrote about the creation of the quilt in the blog post. You see it at the bottom. She was just so bright. I mean, at the age in 1930, when she was 81, she was the first woman ever to run for California governor. She was not, I mean, she did not win. 4 years later, in 1934, she had completed her life. And she left behind her library, her professional scrapbooks, a cook stove, 113 pieces of flatware, oil paintings, a sterling tea set. The sterling tea set was very important for her because she had various clubs where she educated women. So you would pay a fee, and like society women, others would come together and discuss what it means to have certain rights. So she was quite an educator in that sense, and kind of funny, always very fashionable until the end of her life. She also left 2 sewing machines. Yeah. So that is it. That's my introduction. And I'll stop the share. So,
well,
yes.
thank you, Maria.
To here. That's
yes. She sounds absolutely fascinating. And yes,
and in Iowa, you might find more about that school and what she did and how special it really was for a girl to be educated. Oh, I forgot to mention, at 15, she fell in love and eloped and went to a farm. And whoever has worked on a farm knows how hard that is. She worked very hard. Within 5 years, she had the first 3 of her 5 children. And then she just got away from there, went to Portland and studied law by herself. She sued a law school in San Francisco for the right of women to attend law school. In the end, she won, but she herself never attended law school because she had spent all her money fighting for others. So she had a total of 5 children. Then her husband left her and she declared herself a widow because being deserted just didn't work in the society. Her mother followed her and helped with the children. So I think that was a lifelong that was a big part of her life. She also had the role, she had to bury 2 of her children, which is extremely tough if you have that happen. She spoke about many things, but never about the deaths of the children. There were just pain points she didn't talk about. And for me, that brings her really close as a human being, not only on her accomplishments, but
I think we froze.
Thank you.
Maria, can you repeat the last part? Because you froze. Oh, I think she's.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
All right, so the last part was, for me, it was important to read about her life, about her children, that she was a single mother, that her mother supported her, that she lost 2 children. And while she talked about almost everything in her life, she never talked about that part. And I can understand that. There are just things where the pain point is so high, you can't communicate over it. And so for me, all these things brought her close as a person, not only as a very important historic figure. She has now a building named after her in Los Angeles, where she also worked. By the way, she invented the role of public defender. Before that, she was really an innovative person. Before that, people weren't defended. They were put into prison without any defense.
Wow.
If you couldn't afford it. So, she is quite a person. So I highly recommend Googling her, at least as a start.
Well, thank you for bringing to her attention, because there's a lot of people that owe a lot to her in her fight. And your quilt, like you said, when Maria's quilts got a sleeve on it so we can hang it, but we have historical buildings, so we can't screw holes in. But I will tell you, if you're ever don't know how you're going to do something to hang it on a wall, just use command strips, because they actually work. And that's what's holding it. But I still have it attached to our system because I'm deathly afraid of everything falling down. But yes, so we were able to put it in a column, because I kept looking at that for a couple of weeks saying, I got to get those up there, because I knew it was a part of your entire quilt. So command strips, they always work. All right. Anyone have any questions for Maria? And you can always put them in the chat box later if you think of anything. So, all right, Deb and Kris.
Okay, Deb's going to share her screen. I'm Kris. Deb is currently muted, I think, so you might want to unmute yourself. Our subject was Catherine McCormick. And we came through this quite accidentally when we were called to submit a quilt for this show. We already had this photograph of Catherine McCormick on our wall, a design wall, for years, literally years, because we had always wanted to do her portrait, but we just, couldn't figure out what quite to do. And so when we got this call from Sandra Sider, we said, okay, would you be willing to have us do her? And she said, absolutely. So it really was, for this show, it was important that she was a suffragist, and she worked hard for the development of the League of Women Voters, etc. But we really think of her arc of life, just like Clara Fultz. What an amazing woman she was her entire life. She almost single-handedly funded the research for the birth control pill. And she was a huge donor to MIT, funded the first women's dormitory. She started the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. It just goes on and on. She was wealthy from her father. Mr. Dexter was a banker, I forgot already. And she married into, yes, that's the McCormick Reaper family. So she became insanely rich. And she used that money to forward the rights of women. So we're pretty grateful for her. So we did a lot of research, just as Maria did on Catherine McCormick. And then we, go ahead, Deb, let's move to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah. And then we get into the artistic process.
Right.
And
so Deb's going to take over.
And she wasn't an in-your-face person. She was a very behind-the-scenes person. She had the money and she had knowledge, but she didn't care for the limelight. And one of the things we thought when we did her is we wanted to make her vivid and stand out and be as loud for all her accomplishments as she was quiet in real life. So we took we thought, okay, let's look at some wild faces in art. And so we started with these and said, okay, let's go with the colorful face. And then we went to we work a lot on the computer, so we could take the photograph, and again we got permission just like Maria because it was in the collection of MIT, and the portrait was just absolutely fabulous. We loved everything about it except the color. And then so we do some tests, and we just find that green faces do not work well. So that's, you can see we nixed a couple of those. And then we went to the colors of the suffragist movement, which was purples and whites and yellows. And so we thought, let's do that. And what we do is we cut out words and letters. So you can see Kris cutting out magazines, and we have stacks and stacks. This is just one of our stacks about the person. So our research really is important because we are looking for words that describe what we've read. And then we print out a big cartoon and start pasting those words. And this was the first time we had actually just said, we're going to just do it in black and white and add the color in the computer. So that was a new part of our process. And you can see we're just cutting and pasting. And here is a little close-up of the type of things that we wrote about her. You can see, many obstacles and all kinds of things, a rich family, mechanized harvesting, put your money to work, things like that we just found important. And then when we combine the drawings in the computer with the text, we could get something like this. And our text was just, her face was just a little off for us. So again, in the computer, we can change the look of her face. I'm going to go back and forth. She was just a little too fat in that one side. So that's the magic of the computers, that Maria paints, so she has a harder time, fixing things like this. We can just go in and change whatever we want. So that's the front, and then the face part. And then Kris is going to talk about what we did in the background here.
So this is acceptance speech she made at and I have to look at it, at the National Association for Women's Suffrage, National Women's Suffrage Association, when she became treasurer, and that was her acceptance speech. So we just put that in the background, and you can see it's really large, and it's virtually impossible to read, but that's our sort of secret homage to the word as aesthetic quality as well. And so we have a close-up, I think, of the background coming up. And then you can see that you really have to will go in. We do like to try to put things in where we make people come up and really look at it closely. So that is what is there, and that's how we created the background for this piece. And then we needed to work on that boa. So we just scanned in just lots and lots and lots and lots of text, lots of text. And then we printed it out, and you could see some of it was sheer. And then we went about tying it into an actual fake feather boa. And that's me on the left, just cutting up the strips. So that took, I don't know, a couple of afternoons. Yeah, just to tie that. And we actually did add just simple ribbon as well to fill it out. And I'm modeling. And luckily those were nice days that we got to do that outside. And then you can see us attaching the boa at the end after the quilt was finished. And then I think the next slide, then the next slide is we wanted to also add in a part about diaphragms, because she was a colleague of Margaret Sanger's. And when Catherine McCormick went to Europe, she smuggled in over 2,500 diaphragms for Margaret Sanger's birth control clinic, because it was they were illegal in the United States at the time. So trust me, in 2016, when we made this quilt, it was very hard to find a diaphragm. So we put out a call, and we actually ended up with a diaphragm from a friend and the diaphragm that they used to use in the teaching kit at Planned Parenthood. They were very kind to let us have it, because they don't teach it anymore either, because it's just out of favor now in the United States. So it is actually two of them. They're both sewn into the quilt, because that's what Catherine McCormick did. She had sewn the diaphragms into clothing. Now I say I am sure she had them sewn into clothing, but that's how she smuggled them into the United States. So that was kind of a little fun little side note. And then it was 2016. And so everything was printed, but we had the election in the United States in 2016, when it was a record year for women to get voted into the Senate and the House. So we by hand added every single person who got elected. We had already put in people who were but I think I think we got all the people who got elected. Women, yes, all the women who got elected. Yes, thank you for clarifying. And yeah, so if you lift the boa, that's where you can see the names.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So we had a visitor come in to see, and I was working at the desk, and she was looking at your quilt, and she said, "Where's the other diaphragm?" And I just looked at her, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, and I said, "A diaphragm?" And she's like, and I read your artist statement, but I completely blocked that out. And she was like, "Yeah, there's a diaphragm." And so here we go. My retail associate, myself, and this customer put gloves on, and we start to fill up your quilt because we couldn't figure out where the diaphragm was. And if anyone had ever said that day I was going to be filling up a quilt for 2 diaphragms, I would have laughed at you, because there was no way. But yeah, that's what we did. And we had to pull up your blog because we could not find the second one. And we figured out where it was, and we found it. But thank you for the enjoyment. That was very good. Yeah.
The fun part's about being a director, being
Yes.
in the, so you can do that. Yeah. We really like to have secrets.
I love it. And just hearing your story now on why you put that in there, and it was a little more detail. So that was good. That was fun to hear too. The quilt's amazing. It was great to see how you did that. I had no idea that you cut out from magazines and would paste those down. How long did that take you?
Days, weeks.
Just, yeah.
It
Yeah.
really depends if we have, because we started thinking about her many years before this opportunity arose. And so we had already had a collection of words that we thought would fit with her. So.
Wow. Wow. What a process. I think
But that's the fun part, you know, because we collaborate and we're sitting around the table and we're gluing these things on and we're laughing. You know, we might put two things that are really not, you don't think they'll go together. And so we get a giggle out of what we put together. Just
I can tell you have a lot of fun. Yeah, that's the other thing for anyone who's come. And I know some of you on here have been here, and every quilt, you almost have to see it 10 times because you all put so much detail, like on Clara's dress. I still haven't read all of the things that are on there, and all of your words. And then just in Patty's, all of the images and the faces on there. I mean, it's a lot to take in. That's why it's a good hour, and people look drained when they're done. I mean, it's pretty powerful. Yeah. Any questions for the Pixeladies? I don't see any. So we are going to move on to Patty.
Okay, I'm going to share my, says host disabled screen sharing.
Oh, hold on. Let's make sure you are a co-host. Now you are.
And here we go, I guess. Well, that's odd. Usually.
Did it work?
Well, I'm trying to get to it.
There it is.
Let me just, it's a little different from what I'm used to. So I think, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. All right. So unlike some of you, I have been working with historical images for over the past decade. And so when I was invited to do a piece for Deeds Not Words, it was not out of my wheelhouse, although I had never done anything about the suffragettes. I had never even begun to explore those historical images. So the first thing I do, because I am not just a quilter, but a printmaker, the first thing I do when I look for images is I go to my very favorite place on the internet, the Library of Congress collection of prints and photographs. And it is just, I can spend hours, days there looking for something to interest me. So I Googled in, as you can see up here, I put in suffragettes and up came thousands of images. So Sandra had suggested that perhaps we would focus on one particular person, one person of stature. And as the emails started flying by between those of us who were working on this project and myself, I still hadn't settled on someone, and the people I was thinking about were all getting snapped up. So I looked at images, and like this one of Margaret Vale Howe, who I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, seriously, how much fun is that image? And she happened to be, by the way, the niece of Woodrow Wilson. So I thought, well, that's really fun. But I was having trouble like really being fixated on any one person. And then Inez Bosvain came up, and it was such a beautiful image. And I thought, oh, she could be it. I have to tell you, I downloaded and worked on probably 50 images. But what finally, and then this one, I really seriously wanted this one. But the reason you'll see later, I didn't choose them is because they were already cropped. This Fola La Follette and Rose Livingston, they were in several photographs. They were very active in New York, and you just have to look at them. And they were with this 14-year-old who was unnamed in this photo. And all of these are on the Library of Congress. Most of them were done by Harry and Ewing and part of the Bain collection. But then I found this one. And when I saw these two women, Mrs. Hardy Stubbs and Miss Rosalie Jones, with their flags and their hats, which identified them as a marcher, They were in New York. They had the banner across their chest. And of course, the clothing, I mean, you can't help but ignore, I mean, these women. But what captured me with them was the joy, was that they were together, they were doing something possibly a little risky, a little unexpected for women in society, which they probably were at that time. And so they became my #1 favorites until I stumbled upon this image. Now, these were
Uh-oh. Patty, we've lost you. Coming back.
do you have me now?
We got you now.
Okay. Yeah, it says my internet connection is unstable, which is unusual. So in any event, they of course had this Pennsylvania sign, which was right away compelling for me. But what I really loved was the diversity among the ages. So there were younger women, there were older women. They all had the banners, but they had been part of a massive march in 1917 from every state in the Union to Washington, D.C. And what it reminded me then of was the Women's March just a few years ago. And I thought all of these individual women who in fact had tremendous influence and power would not have succeeded had it not been for all the individual women. Those women who left their husbands, left their families, left their neighborhoods, and did something really quite unusual in 1917, go to Washington, D.C. and march en masse. And so that became the focus of my quilt, was the everyday woman. So let me go back. Well, it's going the wrong direction. Sorry about that. So then to the process. When I work with an image, as soon as I have the image, the first thing I start to do is I dye my fabric. All the fabric in every quilt I make, I have dyed myself. So I start with white fabric. I use shibori pulls. I use rope resist. And these are kind of like the simple tools of my trade. And what I really didn't want is I didn't want a pink quilt. I don't know why, but I just didn't. And so I kind of settled on some bluish gray kind of colors in that range. Here's just the simple tools that are part of that. And then I start working on the resist. So I wrap poles, I wrap ropes, and most fabrics go into the dye bucket at least twice, sometimes 3 times. And I end up with stacks of fabric. And as I'm doing all of this, it's probably taking me maybe 1 to 2 dye sessions a day for probably 2 weeks. And because I'm just trying, I know what I'm looking for when I get it. And so there's bucket after bucket and pole after pole of fabric that gets dyed. And what I do is I start then taking those pieces of fabric and I put it on my design wall. So I see what I have. Do I need something brighter? Do I need something lighter? Do I need more gray? Do I need more blue? And so that's sort of my process. I end up with massive amounts of fabric. I try to dye at least 2 pieces of fabric for every image I think I'm going to use. Now, normally I work a little bit bigger than the quilt that's at the museum right now, but there were some size limitations. Otherwise, it would have been 8 feet wide. But I had to cut it in half. So I stayed with the 2 images. And once the fabric is ready, off I go to silk screen. And I'm really lucky because in the north side of Pittsburgh, there is Artist Image Resource, which is a print shop, and I can rent space there. So the mess of doing a lot of silk screening, which is very messy, I don't have to have in my house. You really can't do it in your house. This isn't an image from that, but this just shows you their photo emulsion screens. I love that Deb and Kris showed Andy Warhol because it's right down the street from the Andy Warhol Museum, and it's the same technique. It's a photo emulsion screen, and I print the fabric. And so here I am getting things ready to go, and I print and print and print until I have all of my fabric used up. And I iron the fabric onto freezer paper so that, which is really kind of a great tool that a lot of people don't know, including, I kind of taught people at Artist Image Resource how to do it, because the racks behind me, I can lift that image up and put it on the drying rack like a piece of paper. So it's not like trying to print a t-shirt where it's flopping all over itself. It's really cool. And so I end up coming home with, now this is a subsequent piece from another invitational. I thought I would never do another suffragette as long as I live, but I ended up doing another one. But nevertheless, this is how I come home from AIR with stacks of these prints, and I pull them off and start cutting them and arranging them on my design wall. For this particular quilt, it was pretty simple because I only had the 2 images because we were restricting the size somewhat. And this is the finished quilt. But before it's put together and quilted, one of the things I do like to do, much like Deb and Kris, is I love that little lean in factor. And so I try to find news and articles that are relative to the time period. So in the 4 corners of this quilt and here and there are little news articles about the arrest that took place. And these are based on the time period. And so then I think that adds a little bit of context, makes it a little more interesting to stand there. And when I look at this quilt, it makes me think of just the every woman, not one superstar, but all these women who somehow congregated and worked together to have things really be, to change for all of us. And here's a detail which shows some of the stitching, and you can see the dot of the silk screen. So many times people think that my work is digitally created. It isn't. It's hand dyed fabric, which you can see, and it's been silk screened by hand. And I mean, I've tried the digital printing here and there, but for me, there's just nothing quite as good as the ink. I can see it. I love it. So I'm kind of stuck with that. And that's my little 10-minute thing. And you can go to my website, and I'm going to stop sharing at the moment if I can find out how to do. Here we go. And so that's my no shrinking violets.
Very nice. Very nice. Maria was wondering, do you just use cotton or do you use other fabrics in your dyeing?
Well, I because I'm printing on it, I use Kona cotton. Now Kona cotton tends to be a little hefty. People who just dye fabric and don't print on it, they may actually prefer something a little less stiff as Kona, but I use Kona prepared for dyeing because it does have it's a little bit on the heavier side, so it's easier to print on. The ink doesn't go through the back. So yeah, and that's great because then I just only buy one fabric. I don't have a stash. I have leftovers, but I don't have a stash of having to buy fabric. I always, in my mind, when I work on any quilt, I kind of think, okay, what colors am I going to go here? And sometimes they shift as I'm dyeing, as the buckets are progressing. But like I showed you, I do put them on the design wall, so I kind of have a sense, okay, how's this looking? And
Yeah. See, that's why I love these webinars. I did not know you screen printed those.
yep.
Yeah,
They're not digital. Take a closer look, you'll see the ink.
Exactly.
Yeah, the only way that the news articles, those are put on with transfer paper.
I was going to ask you that.
Because that's a one-off. So
Okay.
to have a screen burned, it's expensive and it's an effort. So it's a darkroom process to burn a screen. So you don't want to do it for a little one-off. But if I'm going to use them, if I'm going to print like 10 or 12, or in some of the other quilts, 20, different prints. So yeah, I love the print process. I have a photography background. So when I silk screen, I kind of feel like the magic that I used to feel in the dark room, which nobody, unless, some of you might remember that I used to have a dark room in my studio apartment when I was in college, and that magic of having a white sheet of paper in a tray of chemicals that suddenly appear with a picture. That's the way I feel when I pull the squeegee. I pull it and you're like, well, and you lift it up and you go, ah. So it's, I get that aha moment every time. It's a lot of fun.
It looks like fun.
It is fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just now I have to go back, and whenever I hear you guys talk, now I have to go back and look at your quilts again.
Yeah, you can see the dot. You can see the dot.
Yeah, I saw that in the photo, and now I'm like, oh, okay. Now I know when there's a dot. That's what I'm looking at. Because there's that pixelated look too, and yeah, learning so much.
Actually, recently I've started to even make the dot a little bit bigger on some of my latest quilts, only because then people get it. Otherwise, I mean, I go to these exhibitions and people say, what printer do you have? What do you do you have an Epson? What are you printing these out with? Well, no, I don't. So
it's a lot more difficult. Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily more
Not
difficult.
difficult.
I think it's equally difficult to do it properly digitally, like Deb and Kris do. I think that's a challenge for someone like me. It's just different.
It's
just different.
Yep. They all have a long process.
Marissa, I had a question for Maria.
Yeah.
It seems like I actually cheated and looked at your website. Is that the first 3D piece you've done? And what sparked you to make that in 3D, the column to go around? I mean, was it because of the subject matter that you just had to do it, or have you been thinking? Because Deb and I are in the process of trying to do some sort of 3D piece, and I'm just curious of how that thinking went for you on that.
It's definitely the first, and it was driven by the subject matter that I felt she was a column in her various communities. So I tried to think about how to create a column that at the same time was that you can ship, basically. I mean, I cannot make a fixed column, which is technically easier, but then how do you ship it from museum to museum? By the way, I really liked that this was an invitational show, because I felt I can do my best if I know that a piece will be included. Like with this column, I can think freer. I can go the extra step. When it is, I think if it had been a jeweled, I probably wouldn't have applied even, and the piece would have never been created. Because I mean, we all have doubt. We say, well, maybe I'm not so good, maybe I'm not so connected to that, and the piece would not have been created. So I'm very happy about this opportunity. And also the 3D part. I have done some other things since then in 3D, like using umbrellas. As you know, in California, rain is always a topic. So I created a series of silver rain umbrellas and stuff, but it's not my main part. I always come back to that I love painting and stitching.
Can I just share my screen? Because we never showed the final image of ours. And if somebody hasn't been, and I just like, oh.
Yeah, I have it too, if you want me to show it.
No, I have.
You got it?
Share right here.
By the way, anybody who is in our area, I have an open studio. You can always come and visit and look at things.
Oh, fun. And where in California are you again?
An hour and a half north of Sacramento in a tiny hamlet.
Oh, cute.
Call me, I pick you up at the grocery store. Otherwise you might get lost.
Yes, people can make a tour, except our studio is always dirty. It's messy.
To be expected.
Yeah.
That's why I have this lovely blue curtain behind me. So but this is the finished one of Catherine McCormick. So it was really our first foray into a three-dimensional too, because the boa does stand out. And the first diaphragm is here, very visible on the hat band. And the second one is buried under here somewhere.
Yeah. It's that left one. Yeah, and the 3D pieces are, they add that extra element to the exhibit also, I have found, definitely. Because that's the first time we've had 3D that since I've started here. So I think it's a nice touch.
My guess
long have you been
is
there?
knowing how people are working these days, you're gonna start to see more.
I know, we're gonna really have to invest in some command strips. Or figure something out, yeah. Our plaster walls. Great, well, let's see. I'm going to, you guys, if you have any more questions, please put those in the chat box. And in the meantime, as Maria said, this is, we'll just wait right here. This was an invitation only exhibit. And so each of these artists were invited, and they're all award-winning artists, and it's very spectacular. So if you haven't been able to see it and you're anywhere close to Winterset, Iowa, you should definitely come in before April 10th, which is when the exhibit closes. We do have a virtual exhibit available, and the link is on social media. I will have it up on the website very soon, and you can take a look at the quilts, and there's some up close shots so you can get a little closer to the detail. And let's see.
I just want to plug this beautiful catalog that Sandra worked out with Shipper. And if you want to know more, it is quite beautifully done. It includes all the quilts and the stories behind them.
And your bio.
I hate
correct?
not to mention this because
Yeah,
I am pretty critical of catalogs these days. This is a beauty. So
it is.
just want to put this out. You can get this probably at your museum.
At our museum and even online. You can
And
get it on our
online at
shop.
Amazon or from Shipper. So I don't want to let this opportunity to go by, not
Not at all.
to let people get a hand on that.
It's been very popular, and it has some appendixes that go with a couple of the other quilts that have some extensive information so it's definitely a great thing to get after you see the exhibit, or even if you can't come see the exhibit, because it definitely shares all of the information that you'll get. Yeah, so First Ladies, if you see what is that, yeah, one of our guests is showing is or is that Maria? And I've got things hidden here. It's got the First Ladies quilt, the appendix, because it lists all the First Ladies for everything. I mean, it's extensive, and it's Carol. Do you guys, Fowler Gentry, Briar Fowler Gentry is the maker of that quilt. It's stunning. So let's see again.
Carol Briar Fowler Gentry. She
There you
has
go.
4 names.
Yeah, she's got, and so I always stumble. I'm like, oh, which one's first? Yeah.
I've quit it too.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's out of Port Townsend, Washington. So this exhibit, like I said, ends April 10th. So the museum will be closed on April 11th when we're putting up our next exhibit called Midwest Modern, and that runs through June 26th. So this will be the exhibit during our airing of the quilts event, which is June 1st through the 4th. And we will have tickets up very, very soon. We have extended this. So the 1st through the 3rd is going to be classes and a retreat. And the 4th is our airing when we put the quilts out on our covered bridges. We're going to have the Central Iowa Modern Quilt Guild putting quilts up on 3 of our bridges, and we are going to have the Best of QuiltCon. We're still trying to find a location for that, but that is coming. The Des Moines Area Guild will be out at the Madison County Winery. So as you can tell, we put quilts everywhere. There will be quilts on the historical square. It's a good time here in Winterset, Iowa. We do have many events. Like I said, we have our virtual exhibit, and we have gallery walks. We did not get to do for this exhibit, but we will be having one for the next exhibit. We have our virtual quilt events, which are these Tuesdays at 12, and then the airing of the quilts. My computer. And then we are on social media. So if you've missed any of these and you can't find the link, just go to our YouTube channel, Iowa Quilt Museum, and you will see a bunch of our, and I just did that. Whoa, that just happened. Hold on. you will see our old webinars, our former webinars, and sorry guys, technology. There we go. We are on Instagram. We always post our links there as well as on Facebook. So, and we have our current exhibit up as a photo on Facebook. So you always know what that is. I think that's it. Let me check the chat box. I lost my box here. And make sure there aren't any more questions. And do our artists, do you have any last words you'd like to say?
Well, thank you for hosting us, Carissa. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you all for attending and for making these beautiful quilts and bringing it to the Iowa Quilt Museum. We're absolutely honored to have it here in Iowa in Winterset. So thank you. Carol says thank you, and she enjoyed the presentation. Wonderful. All right, well, we'll let everyone, you guys all have a good day. And it's great
Thank
meeting
you all.
everybody.
you,
Thanks again for
everybody.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.